Now, as promised, we're going to hear from a couple of experts on inter-Korean relations here in the studio. Nearing the end of an historic day, we're joined by Dr. Kim Chang-su, who is Research Fellow Emeritus at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses.
Many thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here tonight, Dr. Kim. And our very own Kim Minji. Thank you, Minji.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start with you, Minji. It's now after 10 o'clock p.m. Korea time. The official schedule for today in Pyeongyang is over, but it ended with sort of on a cultural note. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, shortly after the summit talks between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, they were scheduled to take part or look at a cultural performance which would be held at the Pyeongyang Arts Center. And it opened back in 1960 and it can hold up to 1,300 people. Now here they were supposed to watch the Samjian Orchestra play, and it's the same one, if you remember, that performed in Gangneung and Seoul back in February alongside the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Now, a key here was whether Kim Jong-un would be also participating, watching with them, but we don't have the footage yet, so we will have to see. And this was also followed by a dinner banquet at the Bongnan House or Magnolia House, and this is also where former South Korean presidents Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun also had their state banquets.
Do we know yet what was on the menu for the banquet? The last time we saw one of these banquets, it was full of symbolism, wasn't it?
Many are expecting symbolism again. We don't know for sure. We will have to see until the footage comes. Many were saying cold noodles, naengmyeon could be on the list.
Likely so, yeah.
Yes, but tomorrow they're visiting Ongryugan, which is the place that served the naengmyeons last time during the April summit in Panmunjom. So maybe they'll get a taste there tomorrow. We'll have to see. Okay,
we'll see. And Professor Kim, zooming out a little bit, let's talk about the objectives for both sides coming into this summit, because there are quite a lot of them. What specifically do they want to achieve on either side here?
There are many for them to achieve, but for the Korean side, South Korean side, I think to give them more clear idea that North Korea is really mean business, that is in terms of denuclearization, because North Korea has been pressed by the West side, in particular the United States. There has been no sufficient progress or evidence of any progress on the denuclearization issue. So they have to come with a much more detailed, even though it's meant to be a partial list of kind of nuclear weapons, the location, something. So that might be convincing the United States to come up with another meeting with Mr. Kim. So that is the number one priority for South Korea. I think for the North Koreans, that is on the lower at the bottom, because number one priority is the guarantee of its regime provided by the United States South Korea, which has been a hostile power to the North Korean leaders for several decades. How they're going to get the assurance of their own regime and how they're going to improve their economic situation in the north, and also how they're going to establish a permanent and solid peace on the Korean Peninsula. That has been said in the Panmunjom Declaration on April 27th. So repeating all these full points on the declaration, that is a common goal for both leaders, but particularly for the South Korean leaders, it would be, as Mr. Moon Jae-in said, the burden is heavy on my shoulder. That is how they're going to really impress the South Korean public as well, and the United States, that North Korea is really ready, and it means they're going to implement all the measures that have been related to denuclearization eventually. So that's number one priority. But second priority as well is related to the first one, how they're going to provide some security assistance to North Korea. By our side, that is how we're going to reduce the military tension along the DMZ, for example. How are we going to remove the GPs, and how are we going to make a JSA into a peaceful region again? So there are many things on the diplomatic and military side as well. So that's a number of priority. But for North Korea, I think number one priority, watching all these video footage this morning and this afternoon, North Korea really wants to get a project the image of a country, a normal country like, and that's greeting the people along the way, which is quite different from his father, 2010 and 2000 and 2007. So this is again, Mr. Kim, I'm very accessible to the general public, and I'm very open-minded, and I'm the guy who can really talk to the South Korean leader and the U.S. leaders and other leaders as well, for that matter. So this is a kind of, for North Korea, giving the impression that North Korea is no longer an isolated country, and they are pretty much open, and they are ready to open up and reform, even though the terminology has been a kind of taboo in the past. So this is a pretty much I think one thing that I've noticed looking at all these footage is this whole process for this particular day, the first day, has been pretty much meticulously choreographed by Kim Jong, because every detail, every place they visited was pretty much orchestrated, and the places, the time they spent, and the people they met was very well orchestrated, because she's really expert on propaganda, by the way. So I think overlooking at what happened for today, it's been a long day. I think even though they're still working on the specific of the joint declaration, which might be possible tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, because it's a very hard stuff. But I think they start very good with starting with a very easy parts, that is the music and visiting people on the streets and visiting children's hospital as well, which is also good, a tremendous boost for the success of this particular meeting in Pyongyang this time.
Right, so this was the easy part, as
That's
you
right.
say. And it sounds like whatever comes out of it in written form will be limited, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Can you describe some of that? Because we've got officials meeting on the sidelines about various projects, potential projects, economic, you name it, forestry, removing certain guard posts from the border, like you indicated. Right. What are the limitations on what they can do today?
Because if you sign a kind of joint agreement, because there are certain limits, because space-wise or limit-wise, it must be kind of a little bit abstract. Because all details will be made by some other proceeding documents by the working level. So
and
I
yet
think
it needs to be concrete.
Concrete. So that's why it'll be very difficult. If you find a terminology like denuclearization or kind of pragmatic or practical measures to achieve the denuclearization at the final stage, I think there will be a good success. So that particular terminology is especially what we're looking for in the West, United States, South Korea. But we understand it's very difficult for the North Korean leaders to write down that particular terminology in the joint agreement tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So
Indeed.
they're still working on it, I guess. Yeah.
We'll have to see. Minji, turning to you, we've been seeing some reports overseas, especially about some skepticism in some corners about what can actually come out of this. What can you say about that?
Well, South Korea's presidential chief of staff, Im Jong-seok, actually said that regarding denuclearization, it's a blank space. So we will have to see what actually comes out of the summit talks after tomorrow's, the morning one as well. And you mentioned foreign media. Foreign media haven't been so optimistic about the current talks as well. Some have said that the two leaders will have to come up with a specific time frame for denuclearization, which is going to be a big task. Some have also called it a gambling. But given that the two leaders have been acquainted before and they jumped right into the talks today, there is some sort of optimism that they may come up with an agreement that's satisfactory. Maybe not for all.
Maybe not for all. But speaking of things that were less than satisfactory, there was a slight mishap today, as we heard in the report, where South Korean top legislators were unable to meet with officials in the north. But what kind of meetings are happening on the sidelines here that we might see come into this final document? Because we do want something concrete again.
Oh, I don't know the specific evidence because I haven't seen any footage, because we have to wait a couple of days until they return to Korea, and they have some additional footage showing their activities during their stay in Pyongyang this time. Because talking about the mishap, I think it was not a designed mishap. I think it's actually meeting the head of the presidium is important. Vice chairman is nothing compared to So I think it is not a violation of protocol, even though they're talking about the meeting between the party leaders and the vice chairman of that particular assembly, Supreme People's Assembly. But there must be some reasons why. But I think the reason, because the fact they meet the head of the president of the presidium of the Supreme People's Command, Kim Yong-nam, that's all. I think. Because on the sidelines, actually, they're going to maybe they're looking for some other scheduling for some. If they really want to talk to them on these inter-parliamentary cooperation, for example, that's something they can do tomorrow on the sidelines. Not just meeting, because this is the first visit to the Workers' Party Supreme People's Assembly. So I think it's quite protocol-wise. It's good, rather than meeting the number two guys. Meeting the first one is it's a very commonplace all over the world. I don't know why many people are calling it a mishap or something, because the expectations are running high because these are the leaders of the major parties in Seoul. But I think it's not to the North Korea. North Korea means because it is, if you look at all the footage, it is particularly focused on the President Moon and Mrs. Moon, all their activities throughout the day. All the rest, all the people, special delegates and people, they are important figures, including business leaders. They were kind of sideline. If you look at only the footage, but something will definitely going on either tomorrow or something already did go. Even though we didn't see the footage.
That could very well be, and interparliamentary cooperation was up on high on the agenda. Now, we will have some footage coming in here from the cultural activities that went on in Pyeongyang this evening.
Yep, so the footage that we're seeing right now is just before the Samjian Orchestra took place. We can see cultural figures. He is composer Kim Young-suk of South Korea. We can see singer Ailey in the background. So we think they're going. So it's a performance that was held to greet the South Korean delegation.
Yeah, very good. We heard earlier the orchestra, which was very impressive, and the choir too. To carry on with, we talked about President Moon being at the center of it, the leaders themselves, North and South. President Moon said he felt a burden today. Is it all on him to keep this going? We know that President Trump is perhaps waiting for something to come out of this. President Moon has been a mediator. The pressure must be immense on him.
Sure, no, the burden is not only on him, because this burden should be shared by all the leaders, North Korea and South Korea, and also Mr. Trump as well, because Mr. Trump has been pressing South Korean leaders that he has to convince North Korea to be much more forthcoming to the denuclearization issues. So far, because of their own concerns and fears in North Korea, because I'm not sure about their own regional stability and safety as well. So if they get moving along, they get some assurance from the United States and South Korea that your region will remain safe, and we're going to provide some guarantee, then he's going to be much more willing to come into the issue of denuclearization. But anyway, beginning with probably the submission of even a partial list, even if a rough list of their nuclear arms, and rough timetable for implementing specific projects vis-a-vis the United States and South Korea as well. So there will be a kind of tremendous burden on the North Korean leadership. So the burden is on both sides.
On both sides.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a partial list would be something, because last time we got the promise that nuclear facilities and missile facilities would be destroyed, and indeed, to a certain extent that happened.
To a certain extent, yes.
Right. Well, we keep getting footage coming in throughout the evening because the main press center in Seoul is the source of all of the footage that we're getting around the world from Pyongyang. So that continues to come in, and as it comes in, we will continue to show that footage. But Minji, there's been a delegation of business people going with President Moon to North Korea this time. Some very high-profile figures indeed. Lee Jae-yong of Samsung Electronics and many others, Hyundai. Tell us about that, and what's the response been like?
Actually, the business delegation did draw a lot of controversy because in terms of economic cooperation, sanctions imposed on North Korea are still in place, so there's not much that we can do at this point. And it was also a question raised during the press briefings at the main press center earlier today, and what the presidential office said, it would more or less be discussions about what potential projects could take place between the North as a follow-up to negotiations that they've had so far. And rather, it doesn't have a special meaning because a business delegation has accompanied the president before in previous inter-Korean summits, and they just plan to shed light on the benefits that North Korea could possibly get the benefits that it could get if it were to denuclearize.
The benefits could be enormous for some of these businesses that have accompanied the president, but there's not much that at this point they can do, right?
At this point, because of the international sanctions imposed on North Korean regime, there's nothing much that we can do at this point. But they're saying gradually, it's not rather looking at the short-term benefits, but looking at this in a long-term perspective, that these are some of the projects that they can do to prosper together. It's not just the North Korean side that benefits from it, but from the South Korean side as well, as we've seen in the joint Kaesong industrial complex, which has been shut down for now.
And speaking of Kaesong, that's sanctions became an issue sort of on the sidelines there because when they set up the new liaison office, the sanctions were a factor as well. Dr. Kim, tomorrow we will have another day of meetings, at least one meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Moon. We don't know what they took up in today's meeting, but what do you think we could see tomorrow? Things go well, they say a joint press conference?
I really don't know, but hopefully sometime in the afternoon or by the early morning before they depart back to Seoul, they might produce a kind of joint agreement with some specific terminology in it that can really convince Mr. Trump to come to the second meeting with Mr. Kim, and also at the United Nations General Assembly. I think they have been done for this purpose already at this working level between the two Koreas, and it will be the two leaders who will decide on the important terminology we've been looking for in this particular meeting. So my guess is they will somehow, maybe they'll use a little bit different wording as opposed to the specific wording we have been looking for. If you look at the Pyeongyang case, we are all looking for the CVID, but we ended with a lot of just complete verification, complete denuclearization.
Right.
So we have to a little bit lower our expectation. What might come out of the joint conference, joint meeting tomorrow? More realistic expectations, because we know the stakes are high for both leaders to come with a very specific terminology, even though there has been great expectations and maybe kind of pressure from Washington, but they're going to show that this is a certain limits we can reach at this particular point in time, rather than sometime in the next couple of months, because there is another chance for the summit meeting between Washington and Pyongyang, and also possibly I understand Mr. Xi Jinping was to visit Pyongyang again.
That would be his first time there.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. Always looming in the background there is the United
China.
States
and the China factor, right?
Yeah, both of those. And speaking of the United States, just next week, President Moon will be going there for the United Nations General Assembly, and he'll be wanting to have something to show for this meeting. President Trump will be speaking as well, but Kim Jong-un will not.
No, he will not make it because he has not been invited. I mean, I don't think his ability to speak in the hall, in the open society, but before the United Nations General Assembly, I don't think he's ready to do that. Maybe it's not just a language problem, but the courage, the capability that he could really convince the general audience out there, including the United States. He still has a limited talent to do that. Maybe a couple more meetings, and after that, he might attend the UNGA and then deliver his own speech to really convince Mr. Trump to come to the negotiating table again with him. So I don't think, because it's not just the scheduling conflicts, maybe some reasons they are not just ready to do that. Particularly, he's going to probably his man or women to their place.
Yeah, well, I mean, things have changed so much already this year for Kim Jong-un, starting with his New Year's address. Do you remember when he came out in the business pinstriped suit? That was new. Obviously, many of the things that have happened this year are new, so give it time, and we never know what we'll see. There's got some more footage there coming through from the cultural performances in Pyongyang, the welcoming performances there.
Yep,
Now,
so
Minji, you are normally covering a lot of parliamentary affairs here in South Korea. And there was the potential, and there still is the potential, for some developments on that front. The process was a little bit contentious, deciding who was going to go up to North Korea and who eventually did go. And today's lack of a meeting, we're not sure. But what do you think?
Well, President Moon Jae-in did invite all the leaders of the 5 major parties, but obviously those who accompanied him is the ruling party chair and 2 minor liberal parties, so the conservative opposition did not turn up. Now, they had been a lot of controversy on these issues has led to the rival parties to be at loggerheads because they had the discussion of the parliamentary ratification of the Panmunjom Declaration, but because it comes with such a hefty price tag, and the opposition parties also said that North Korea needs to show more commitment to denuclearization before they can make a move. And what the government and the ruling party should be doing is getting the understanding of the people first, as it will be a burden on them because it's using taxpayers' money. Today, when the chairs of the parties were here, they were going to give a letter on behalf of National Assembly Speaker to hold inter-Korean parliamentary talks between the 2 sides. But because the meeting today was obviously cancelled, we will have to see if the letter was delivered to the head of the North Korean's parliament. So we will still have to see on that.
Yeah, we'll see. So they haven't ratified the Panmunjom Declaration, which would give it legal force here in South Korea. And whatever comes out of this will perhaps face the same question. But the significance of parliamentary cooperation is as distinct from leaders cooperating is a different front altogether. But tomorrow, another full day. What's on the schedule?
That's right. You did say earlier, but not 100% confirmed, but there is a meeting scheduled in the morning between the 2 leaders again, and they will possibly touch upon the heavier issues. And if all goes well, there will be a press conference following to that. And we will still have to see if the participants in the talks are the same. Today was a 3-to-3 meeting. So the agenda, if we go over it again, is bettering inter-Korean relations, working to speed up talks between the U.S. and North Korea on denuclearization, and easing military tensions. There's a luncheon scheduled at Ongnyugan, and then also tomorrow, President Moon is expected to make a visit to some landmark places in the North Korean capital. We'll still have to see because nothing is confirmed for yet, and also a dinner banquet is scheduled.
All right, that information, the schedule, and the details will continue to come out in dribs and drabs, and we'll keep bringing those to our viewers here on Arirang TV. Now, we're getting close to the end here, Professor, but was there anything else in general that stood out to you? You made some interesting points about how, from Kim Jong-un's perspective, this strengthens his position perhaps as a leader or shows a different side of North Korea.
That's right.
Anything else that really stuck out to you?
Something he did wonderfully is related to his capability to be a normal leader, because greeting people along the way, and also he actually just not, compliment Mr. Moon Jae-in, but also he was talking about the Pyeongyang citizens and how they are supportive of his proposal, his initiative. And I think this is, again the sign that he really liked to project the image of a normal leader, ready to talk with South Korea and the United States. And also he some confidence in his own capability to manage the economy and to manage the people in the country. I think this is very particular. And some of the terminology he used, I think, which has been, pointed out by some South Korean media people. I think it's, if you look at the North Korean
Tell us about
culture,
that. That's interesting.
Yeah, because he called the President Moon like Your Excellency.
Right, kaka.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's quite natural. But for somehow reason, we have some kind of taboo calling the president like Your Excellency because of the military dictatorship
Sure.
in the past. But I think if you look at it, it's quite natural. Your Excellency, His Excellency, Her Excellency. So nothing wrong with that, with the calling. And that's one small thing, but I noticed on the South Korean media, some people talking about, oh, this is one of the most outstanding the points that I noticed during so I think it is quite natural for the North Korean, the head of the ceremonial guard to call our president Your Excellency. That's quite okay. It's actually in tune with the international protocol.
Sure.
So I'm meeting with all these people at the general, the Children's Hospital, and also the University of Music and Dance. I think this is again, this is a pragmatic focus on not only on the Mr. Moon Jae-in, but also the First Lady. This is become very much a normal country in the West and South Korea as well, giving focus not only on the leader, the female, but also the female part is very important, because if you don't get the support from the half of the population in South Korea, because there is no progress guaranteed. So as long as you can get invite some Koreans, not just Koreans, but the support from the very large Korean population, the female supporters, it's very important. So again, this point is, this is very, very well meticulously choreographed by Kim Yo-jong and Mr. Ene, and agreed upon, of course, by the great leader Kim Jong-un.
Point well taken, and a very interesting point. Thank you for your insights tonight, Dr. Kim Chang-su.
My pleasure, thank you.
And Kim Minji, thank you as always for joining us.
Thanks for having me.